Kelly Style, your State Farm insurance agent in Oskaloosa, is excited to be serving the Mahaska County community and the surrounding area. See Kelly at 309 High Avenue E, Oskaloosa, or call 641-673-0088.
And now, your hosts of the Card Subject to Change podcast, for frequency's sake tag team champions of the world, the Wizard CZ, and never wrong, Nick Bull.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Card Subject to Change podcast, the podcast by the fan for the fan. You are listening to the Card Subject to Change podcast. I'm joined by my co-host, the Wizard CZ, and I know I can speak for the Wiz when I say this. We are welcoming in one of our favorite guests that we have. We had him last year for our independent shows for WrestleMania week preview. That's right. We're a week, 6 days actually away from WrestleMania. Yesterday would have been a week from yesterday is WrestleMania night one, but we're a week away from WrestleMania. But there's so much more that happens besides the show of the year in WrestleMania. The rest of the wrestling world and the indie world converges on Philadelphia and has their run of shows. And to take us through those run of shows is our colleague, friend, and recurring guest on the show, the voice of SCW Pro Wrestling, the play-by-play voice, of SCW Pro Wrestling, Tim Regal. Tim, welcome back to the show.
Great to be back with you guys. I'm excited. It's Mania week. Pumped up. Obviously, Mania this year, huge. And it's going to be a big week for indies. Obviously, we're heading to Philadelphia this year, so always hotbed of independent wrestling. That's so many wrestling schools and promotions centered literally within about 30 to 45 miles of Philadelphia. So good or bad in some cases, as some might say. There's been a lot of discourse online that there might be too many shows. And like I said, I weeded out everything that wasn't live streaming or something to that effect. And we still ended up with 28 shows on the list. Like that's how much there's like, so I think I counted up something like over 50 shows, over 100 events, whether it's podcast or concerts or parties like Wale Mania, stuff like that. So if you're one of the lucky people like our boy Mike down at Lopez who's going to Philadelphia this weekend, there is so much to see and do. I've always said this because this has been a phenomenon for a few years. Some of these shows, who goes to all of these shows? Because I don't know how there's that many people to go to all of these shows. You can't go to all these shows. They're literally running one on top of the other. But we're going to focus on, obviously, like I said, the bigger shows and the stuff that you can live stream. There is still quite a bit of it. So let's get into it.
What is the one show, Regal, that you have circled on your map, obviously, besides WrestleMania? What's the one show that you're going to go out of your way, you're going to watch, nothing's going to interrupt it, the number one show that you want to watch on this slew of shows that's happening WrestleMania weekend? So
I'm going to caveat that just a little bit, because obviously the first answer will be Supercard of Honor. But I'm going to take Supercard of Honor out of that list because I think everybody knows it's ROH, it's Tony Khan, it's the satellite of AEW. I think everybody knows that's probably going to end up being the biggest show of the weekend. Obviously, you have your Joey Janela spring breaks. You have your For the Culture, your collective stuff. You've got a lot of stuff for IWTV. I'm going to shout out, and we'll get into it as we get into it, but the show, and we'll get into it as we go down the list, there is a show on IWTV, Action Wrestling presents Dean. It is a tribute show to Dean Rasmussen, who recently passed away. Dean was one of the founders and one of the leaders of the Death Valley Driver message board back in the day. before we had Twitter and everything else. We had message boards. And this show is a tribute to him with a lot of really good wrestlers, a lot of unique matches, and a lot of people that aren't booked 20 times over the course of Mania weekend. So that show, the Action Wrestling Dean show, is the show that might be a little bit down ballot that I am really looking forward to.
All right. Let me ask you, before we actually get into the shows, let me ask you this. There's always someone, or multiple someones, who come out of WrestleMania weekend looking like $1 million, looking like they're going to get signed anytime after WrestleMania weekend on the independent scene. Who are you watching? Who do you have your eye on this weekend?
So, and this goes into a thing of me and our good friend Alex McCarthy were having a conversation.
Sure.
The AEW gutted a lot of the top indie talent. So, looking at a lot of these shows, like the previous years where you had your guys like your Speedball Mike Bailey, or go back even 5 or 6 years ago when Will Ospreay was still coming up and he came over. We're gonna get that breakout talent, but I'm not quite sure who it is yet. It could be one of the Japanese talents that's coming over. It could be one of the Joshi talents that's coming over. It could be one of the luchadors. It could be somebody that maybe we're not hearing about. Maybe they're just maybe they're gonna be a guy that fills in. Obviously you have your stalwarts, you have your Speedballs, you have your Joey Janela's, you've got, obviously I'm a bias, but I always say, I know Manders is always going to be there to show up and show out. So,
hell yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll see. I'm looking, that is one thing that's going to be really interesting this year. And I'm going to look into finding, who's the diamond in the rough that we're going to find this year. Hopefully we do maybe find some new talent this year, because I feel like the talent pool is a little thin.
I got to tell you, there's a name that's on the tip of my tongue that really impressed me back at the Jersey J Cup. And I was looking through the match lists of all the shows earlier. I only saw his name one time. And I was a little disappointed in that, because this kid has some talent. Maybe he won't break out this year, but definitely someone to watch out for in the next couple of years. And that's Alec Price.
Alec Price, a good talent. Another name that popped into my head, because I know he's on a lot of shows this year. And a name that's out there, some people know about him. Obviously, he's familiar locally because he's in Dreamwave as a tag champ. But Marcus Mathers,
yep,
I think has a lot of big matches and a lot of opportunity to show up and show out.
I saw his name quite a few times on the list of matches. Let's get into it, Tim. You're leading the way here. This show is made based around you and what your knowledge of indie wrestling. Where do you want to start? Where are we? What's the first show on your list that you think is going to be worth?
So this year, due to being in Philadelphia, we're actually starting the week tomorrow. Probably today, by the time some of you see this. My good friends over at H2 Wrestling are going to be doing shows all weekend long. So they are starting off the week with one of their Monday Night Death shows on IWTV. A lot of talent, the indie talent that's familiar. Zeta Steel, Marcus Mathers, Tank versus Louis Ramos. Jaden Newman is on the show. I know Manders wrestles there. I don't see his name listed on a lot of shows, but Colby Carino is going to be on these shows. And then they're doing their Hustle Cup, which is their students competing in a tournament. But yeah, if you're a guy that I really like on H2, Ryan is a guy named Ryan Redfield. Big hoss, has had teamed up and had some killer matches with Manders. Marcus Mathers is going to be on all these shows like we talked about. Matt Makowski, who's another name I'm really high on. But those shows are actually going to be Monday and Tuesday before we kick into the Wednesday shows where things really get going.
For those not familiar with H2O Wrestling, what should a fan expect tuning into these shows on Monday and Tuesday to kick off WrestleMania week?
H2 Wrestling is ran by the bulldozer Matt Tremont. It's primarily his students and some outside talent. They run their own school. They have their own arena. you get a mix of solid wrestling, and there will be some death matches if that might be for you or not for you, just to give you the heads up on that. But always some pretty good quality, some pretty decent quality on those H2 shows that I've watched.
And some good looking talent. You mentioned some great names. Just looking at the list, stand out for me. I know who Colby Carino is. Obviously, like you said, Marcus Mathers. Those look to kick off the week hot. Let me ask you this though, Tim. A lot of people are going to be focused on the main draw, and that's WWE. What's give us a really specific reason why someone should tune in here for H2 Wrestling as opposed to Monday Night Raw?
Well, the indie talent in general, I always tell people if you're maybe new to indies or you're primarily a WWE fan, the indies are where you're going to find the next guy. Whether it's, I'm trying to think of like Ricky Starks. I'll use him as an example. A guy who 5-6 years ago was wrestling on a lot of these WrestleMania weekend shows, or a guy like Carmelo Hayes in NXT. A lot of these guys, especially a lot of the NXT guys, a lot of the up and comers in AEW, like Top Flight, they came from the indie scene. So, obviously it's Monday, you're going to be watching Monday Night Raw, but if you're an indie fan, if you want to check out something new, hey, what's out there for you? And then, like I said, we get into Tuesday, and then we get into Wednesday, which then we start getting into multiple shows going on during the day.
Man, you said it best, though. This is the future of wrestling coming up on the independents. That's why we do this show. We have a big focus on independent wrestling, especially during WrestleMania weekend, because these are the guys who are going to be leading the charge in a few years. You're going to see people who are getting up in the years as far as the wrestling business goes, who are going to be retiring, and they're going to need replacements. This is where they're going to find them. This is your up and coming talent, so to speak.
Absolutely. So moving on, I guess we'll get into Wednesday. Wednesdays when things really start getting. It used to traditionally be Thursday. Now we're kind of moving into the Wednesday because you get into Wednesday evening. A lot of people are getting into town. They don't got anything to do. Hey, throw a show up here. So actually kicking off 4 p.m. our time, 4 p.m. Central Time. Labor of Love and Sean Henderson presents Wrestle John from the Attic Brewing Company. This is going to be on IWTV. You have Cheeseburger versus Weber Hatfield, two former Chikara guys. Here's a match that I think jumps off the page to me. Speedball Mike Bailey taking on Paul London on that show. That's a match.
Chills.
That's one of those matches right there that you're only going to get in like a Mania weekend. Paul London doesn't take a lot of booking. So Bobby Orlando going to be on the show. We know we've seen him on Dreamwave. A match I like, The Colony, Electro Ant, Worker Ant, and Ultimo Ant versus the Cyberhawks. That is an old standby from the old Chikara promotion coming back. Okay. If I were to read off all the scramble matches that we get, there's a scramble on the show. On this show, I'm just going to say, guys, if we were to go down every card, we could play a drinking game where you take a drink every time there's a scramble match, and we'd probably be on the floor by the time that the list was done. Because
I'll leave the drinking up to you, Regal.
Yeah.
Fun fact: I'm actually 3 weeks. I'm actually 3 weeks alcohol free. So
all right, good for you, man.
I'm taking a little break. Yeah, that's the joke. Take a drink every time there's a scramble match on one of these shows because you're going to get scrambles all over the place. After that show, say at the H2, going back to the H2 Wrestling Center, there is Intergender Bonanza. A lot of intergender matches, but not all. Main event of this one, Marcus Mathers versus Effie should be a good one. Marcus
Mathers named again, and it's only Tuesday.
That kid's gonna be all over, and yeah, so you're gonna see a lot of him. Austin Luke versus Janai Kai is one that I like. Sonny Kiss, former AEW talent, taking on the current Dreamwave champion Zeta Steele. Or no,
Okay.
Brittany Brooks is the champion.
Brittany
now.
Brooks is the current one. Yep.
Zeta Steel, Dreamwave Talent. So, Sexy Eddie from old school CZW Canada IWS going to be on that show. So, a fun show to look at there. So that's Wednesday, and now I guess we'll get into Thursday, because here's where you really start to amp up, because